Welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab, and thank you for joining us today. We're excited to share another story with you, and we hope you enjoy it. So without further delay, let's begin. Elias Blackwood's pen scratched across the blueprint, making minute adjustments to the design of his latest skyscraper. The clock on his office wall ticked past 9 p.m., but he barely noticed. This project was his magnum opus, the crowning achievement of his career. He was so engrossed that the shrill ring of his cell phone made him jump, leaving an errant line across the paper. Irritated, he grabbed the phone, ready to berate whoever was interrupting his work. But the caller ID gave him pause. Caleb. His son never called this late unless something was wrong. Caleb? What's going on? Elias asked, his annoyance replaced by concern. Dad. Caleb's voice cracked, trembling with emotion. I saw Mom at the Red Moon Hotel. Elias frowned, confused. Okay, your mother's allowed to go to hotels, son. No, Dad. She was with Marcus. Your partner, Marcus. The words hit Elias like a physical blow. He sat heavily in his chair, mind reeling. What do you mean, with Marcus? They were together, like together. I have eat you. Elias's throat went dry. Send it to me. Now. Seconds later, his phone buzzed. With shaking hands, he opened the video file. The footage was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking the figures on the hotel balcony. Vanessa, his wife of 20 years, wrapped in the arms of Marcus, his business partner of 15. But it got worse. As Elias watched, stomach churning, he could make out snippets of their conversation. Push Elias out. Take control of the firm. He'll never see it coming. The betrayal was complete. Not just his marriage, but his livelihood, his life's work. All of it a lie. Elias took a deep breath, forcing down the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. He needed to think clearly now. Caleb, listen to me carefully. Go home immediately. Don't tell your mother you saw her. Don't let on that anything's wrong. I'll handle this. But Dad, now, Caleb, go home and act normal. I promise I'll explain everything soon. After hanging up, Elias sat motionless for a long moment, mind racing. Then, with deliberate calm, he picked up his office phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Jack, it's Elias Blackwood. I need your help. My wife's been unfaithful, and I want to initiate divorce proceedings immediately. Yes, I have proof. I also need you to freeze our joint accounts and start the process of protecting my assets. No, this can't wait until morning. I'm coming to your office now. Hanging up, Elias gathered his things and headed for the door. As he switched off the lights, he cast one last look at the blueprint on his desk. The errant line he'd drawn earlier now bisected the entire design, like a crack in the foundation of everything he'd built. How fitting, he thought bitterly, before stepping out into the night, leaving behind the ruins of his old life. Vanessa Blackwood hummed to herself as she pulled into the driveway, still riding the high of her afternoon tryst with Marcus. The house was dark and quiet as she entered, which wasn't unusual. Elias often worked late, and Caleb was probably holed up in his room with his video games. She flicked on the kitchen light, then froze. Something was off. The air felt different, charged with an unseen tension. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on a stack of papers on the counter that hadn't been there this morning. Heart pounding, she approached slowly, as if the papers might bite. The top sheet bore an official-looking letterhead. Notice of divorce proceedings. No, she whispered, fingers trembling as she leafed through the stack. Divorce papers, bank statements, and screenshots from a video of her and Marcus on the hotel balcony. The blood drained from Vanessa's face as the reality of the situation crashed over her. He knew. Somehow, Elias knew everything. Panic rising in her throat, she fumbled for her phone, trying Elias's number. A robotic voice informed her the line had been disconnected. Frantic now, She tried Caleb's phone. Same result. No, 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 she muttered, racing upstairs. Caleb's room was empty, his closet half bare. In the master bedroom, Elias's side of the closet gaped open, his suitcases gone. Back downstairs, Vanessa booted up the family computer, hands shaking as she tried to access their joint bank accounts. Frozen, not drained, thank God, but completely inaccessible. She slumped into a chair, mind reeling. How had it all fallen apart so quickly? Just this afternoon, she'd been on top of the world, secure in the knowledge that her affair was safely hidden, that her plans with Marcus to take control of the firm were progressing smoothly. But she should have known better. Elias was always 3 steps ahead, always planning for every contingency. Of course, he wouldn't confront her directly. No! He'd strike from the shadows, methodical and merciless. As the shock began to wear off, fear set in. Vanessa knew her husband. He wouldn't stop at divorce. He'd make her pay for her betrayal, strip away everything she valued. And Marcus, oh God, Marcus. Did he know yet? Were his accounts frozen too? Their entire plan was crumbling around her, and she was powerless to stop it. Vanessa reached for her phone again, this time dialing Marcus's number with shaking fingers. It rang once, twice. Vanessa? Marcus's voice was groggy. Do you know what time it is? He knows, she blurted out, unable to keep the panic from her voice. Elias knows everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was tight with fear. What do you mean? Everything. The affair, the plan to push him out of the firm, all of it. He's filed for divorce, frozen our accounts. He and Caleb are gone. Shit, Marcus breathed. How? We were so careful. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Careful enough to be caught on video, apparently. Marcus, what are we going to do? Another pause. Okay, don't panic. We need to think this through. Have you called your lawyer yet? No, I called you first. All right, here's what we're going to do. Call your lawyer right now. I'll do the same. We need to get ahead of this before Elias can do any more damage. Then we'll meet first thing in the morning to figure out our next move. Vanessa nodded, forgetting Marcus couldn't see her. Okay, you're right. We can fix this. But as she hung up and dialed her lawyer's emergency number, a cold dread settled in the pit of her stomach. She knew Elias. He wouldn't have made a move like this without an airtight plan. Whatever came next, she had a sinking feeling they were already too late to stop it. The BMW's headlights cut through the darkness as Elias guided it down the empty highway. In the passenger seat, Caleb sat silently, staring out the window at the passing shadows. They'd left the house just after midnight, slipping away like thieves in the night. Elias had been meticulous in his preparations, leaving no trace of their destination. New identities, secured through channels he'd hoped never to use, waited for them at the end of this journey. He glanced at his son, heart aching at the pain etched on the boy's face. You okay, kid? Caleb shrugged, not looking away from the window. I guess. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can start over. What about Mom? And school? My friend. Elias sighed heavily. I know this is hard, Caleb, but your mother, she made her choice. And right now, we need to protect ourselves. By running away? It's not running away. It's a strategic retreat. We need time to regroup, to plan our next move. Caleb finally turned to look at his father, eyes shining with unshed tears. Did you know? About Mom and Marcus? Elias's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No, I had no idea. How could she do this to us? The raw pain in his son's voice made Elias's chest tighten. He wanted nothing more than to pull over and comfort the boy, but they couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. I don't know, son. People do terrible things sometimes. But I promise you, we're going to get through this. Together. Caleb nodded slowly, then turned back to the window. Elias focused on the road ahead, mind already racing with plans and contingencies. He'd left a cryptic message for his most trusted employee, ensuring the firm's projects would continue in his absence. It wasn't ideal, but it would buy them time. As the miles ticked by, Elias found his thoughts drifting to Vanessa and Marcus. By now, they'd be frantic, searching for any trace of him and Caleb. Part of him, a dark, vengeful part, relished the thought of their panic. Let them squirm, let them feel a fraction of the pain they'd caused. But he pushed those thoughts aside. Revenge wasn't the goal here. Protection was. He needed to keep Caleb safe from the emotional fallout, give them both time to heal and plan their next steps. And if his disappearing act threw Vanessa and Marcus off balance, preventing them from hiding assets or crafting alibis, well, that was just an added bonus. Dawn was breaking as they crossed the state line, the first rays of sunlight painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. Elias reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "We're going to be okay, Caleb. I promise." And as they drove on into the unknown, Elias silently vowed to make good on that promise, no matter the cost. Nathan Reed stood at the drafting table, his pencil dancing across the blueprint with practiced ease. The open-concept office space around him hummed with quiet activity, a far cry from the sleek, high-powered firm he left behind 6 months ago. But there was a satisfaction in this work that he hadn't felt in years. He glanced up at the clock. Nearly time for Ethan to be home from school. The name still felt strange on his tongue sometimes. Ethan, not Caleb, just as he was Nathan now, not Elias. New names, new identities, a new life carefully constructed in the wake of betrayal. Portland, Maine had been a calculated choice. Far enough from their old life to avoid accidental recognition, but close enough to the architectural scene that Nathan's talents wouldn't go to waste. And waste they hadn't. His small firm was already gaining a reputation for innovative, sustainable urban designs. As if on cue, the bell above the office door chimed. Ethan trudged in, backpack slung over one shoulder, a half-eaten apple in his hand. "Hey, kid," Nathan said, studying his son's face. The dark circles under Ethan's eyes seemed a shade lighter today. Progress, however small. How was school? Ethan shrugged, collapsing into a chair. "Fine, I guess. We have a group project in history. My partner seems cool." Nathan nodded, careful to keep his expression neutral. Every new friendship was a potential risk, a chink in the armor of their carefully crafted anonymity. But he couldn't deny his son the chance at some normalcy. "That's good," he said. "Just remember—" I know. Ethan cut him off. "Keep it casual. Don't share too much personal info. I'm not an idiot, Dad." "Nate's in sight." "I know you're not. I just worry." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "Yeah, I know. It's fine. I'm gonna go do homework." As his son disappeared into the back room, they converted into a makeshift living space. Nathan turned back to his work, but his mind wasn't on the blueprint anymore. It was 6 months in the past and hundreds of miles away. He booted up his encrypted laptop, fingers flying over the keys as he navigated through layers of security. Within moments, he was scanning the latest reports on Vanessa and Marcus's desperate attempts to find them. It had been almost comical at first, watching them flail about, hiring private investigators who came up empty-handed time and again. But lately, their efforts had taken on a more frantic edge. Nathan knew why. The lawsuits were piling up, the firm teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Good, he thought. Let them squirm. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to pay for what they'd done. Nathan's eyes flickered to a folder on his desktop, innocuously labeled Project X. Inside was a treasure trove of damning evidence. Emails discussing fraudulent billing practices, records of kickbacks from contractors, proof of design stolen from junior architects. It had taken months of careful hacking and data mining to compile, but it would be worth it. Soon, very soon, he would spring the trap. and Vanessa and Marcus would learn the true cost of their betrayal. Nathan closed the laptop, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd been a fool once, blind to the machinations happening right under his nose. Never again. This time, he would be the one 3 steps ahead. And God help anyone who got in his way. Vanessa Blackwood stared at the stack of papers on her desk, each one a ticking time bomb threatening to blow her carefully constructed world to pieces. Lawsuits from clients claiming breach of contract, demands for payment from suppliers, and worst of all, a notice from the bank warning of impending foreclosure on the firm's office building. How had it all gone so wrong? So quickly? She knew the answer, of course. It had started the moment Elias disappeared, taking Caleb with him. In the blink of an eye, she'd lost her husband, her son, and the steady hand that had guided their firm to success. At first, she and Marcus had been confident they could weather the storm. They had connections, talent, charm. But as the weeks turned to months with no sign of Elias or Caleb, cracks began to show. Clients grew wary, questioning the stability of a firm whose founding partner had vanished without explanation. Junior architects, once eager to please, now watched them with suspicion in their eyes. And then the lawsuits started, one after another, like dominoes falling, each one chipping away at their reputation, their resources, their resolve. A knock at the door jolted Vanessa from her brooding. Marcus entered, his once crisp suit looking rumpled, dark circles under his eyes mirroring her own. "Any word?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing. It's like they've vanished into thin air. The PI hired in Boston thought he had a lead, but it turned out to be another dead end." Vanessa slumped in her chair. "We can't keep this up, Marcus. The money's running out, and if we don't find a way to settle these lawsuits—" "I know." Marcus ran a hand through his thinning hair. "But what choice do we have? If we can just find Elias, make him see reason." A bitter laugh escaped Vanessa's lips. "Make him see reason? After what we did? He'll destroy us, Marcus. You know he will." Before Marcus could respond, Vanessa's computer chimed with an incoming email. She opened it, eyes widening as she scanned the contents. "What is it?" Marcus asked, leaning over her shoulder to read. It's a buyout offer for the firm." Marcus frowned. "From who?" "I don't know. Some holding company I've never heard of. But, Marcus, look at these numbers. This could solve everything." As they pored over the details of the offer, neither noticed the tiny camera hidden in the potted plant on Vanessa's desk, silently recording their every move. Elias leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he watched the live feed from Vanessa's office. The bait had been taken, just as he'd known it would be. It had been almost too easy, really. A series of shell companies, a trusted proxy to handle the negotiations, and suddenly he held Vanessa and Marcus's fate in his hands. They were so desperate for a lifeline that they hadn't even questioned the oddly specific conditions of the buyout. Full disclosure of all company finances and projects. A non-compete clause that would effectively end their careers if violated. Personal guarantees against any undisclosed liabilities. Elias chuckled darkly. They'd sign it all, he knew, and in doing so, they'd hand him every scrap of evidence he needed to bury them. A noise from the other room caught his attention. Caleb, no. Ethan now, he reminded himself, was home from school. Elias quickly closed the video feed and cleared his expression. No need for his son to see the depths of his plans for revenge. "Hey, kiddo," he called out as Ethan entered the room. "How was school?" Ethan shrugged, dropping his backpack on the floor. "Fine, I guess. We started a new unit in history. The teacher wants us to pick a historical figure to do a report on." Elias nodded, trying to inject enthusiasm into his voice. "That sounds interesting. Anyone in particular catch your eye?" "I was thinking maybe Frank Lloyd Wright," Ethan said, a hint of his old passion for architecture creeping into his voice. "You know, since we're supposed to be this big architecture family and all." The words were like a knife to Elias's heart. This big architecture family, the life they'd left behind, the legacy he'd built, all of it tainted now by betrayal. But he forced a smile. That's a great choice. Wright was a visionary. I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job on the report. Ethan nodded, then hesitated, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. Dad, do you think? Is there any chance we might be able to go home soon? Back to our real names. Elias's jaw tightened. Ethan, we've talked about this. It's not safe yet. Your mother and Marcus. I know. Ethan cut him off. They betrayed you. They're trying to find us, blah, blah, blah. But Dad, it's been months. Don't you think maybe it's time to, I don't know, try to work things out? For real, instead of all this cloak and dagger stuff. For a moment, Elias was tempted to tell his son everything about the evidence he'd gathered, the trap he was setting, the reckoning that was coming. But he held back. Ethan was still so young, still clinging to the hope of reconciliation. He wasn't ready to see the full extent of the betrayal, or the lengths to which Elias would go to make it right. I'm working on it, son, he said instead. I promise. We won't have to live like this forever. Just trust me a little longer, okay? Ethan nodded, though the doubt in his eyes was clear. As he trudged off to his room, Elias turned back to his computer, mind already racing with the next steps of his plan. Soon, he told himself. Soon it would all be over, and they could go back to their real lives. But first, Vanessa and Marcus had to pay, and pay they would in full. Jack Hawthorne prided himself on being the best private investigator in the business. He'd cracked cases that had stumped the FBI, tracked down people who didn't want to be found in countries that barely appeared on maps. But this Elias Blackwood case? It was starting to make him question his skills. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the web of connections and dead ends pinned to his office wall. 6 months of work, and he was no closer to finding Blackwood or his son than he'd been on day one. It didn't make sense. A man like Blackwood, successful architect with a high profile in the industry, doesn't just disappear without a trace. There should have been something: credit card transactions, phone records, school enrollments for the kid. But there was nothing. It was like they'd ceased to exist the moment they'd driven away from their home that night. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed as they fell on a recent addition to his evidence board, a series of architectural designs that had been popping up in Portland, Maine over the last few months. Innovative, sustainable urban projects that bore a striking resemblance to Blackwood's signature style. It was a long shot, he knew. Plenty of architects were jumping on the sustainability bandwagon these days. But something about these designs nagged at him. The attention to detail, the clever solutions to complex urban planning issues. It all screamed Elias Blackwood. He'd sent an associate up to Portland to snoop around, but so far, nothing concrete had turned up. The designs were credited to a Nathan Reed, a newcomer to the Portland scene with a suspiciously thin background. Hawthorne's computer pinged, alerting him to a new email. He opened it, eyebrows raising as he scanned the contents. His associate in Portland had managed to snap a few long-distance photos of this Nathan Reed character. The images were grainy, taken from too far away to be conclusive, but there was something in the set of the man's shoulders, the way he carried himself. Hawthorne's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up an old photo of Elias Blackwood for comparison. He overlaid the images, adjusting for the difference in resolution. Gotcha, he muttered, a predatory grin spreading across his face. He reached for his phone, ready to call his client with the good news. But something made him pause, finger hovering over the dial button. This was big, career-defining big. The kind of case that could set him up for life, if he played his cards right. Did he really want to hand it over to Vanessa Blackwood just yet? No, he decided. He needed more. Concrete proof, not just a hunch based on some grainy photos. He'd give it a few more days, see what else he could dig up on this Nathan Reed character. Little did Hawthorne know, his hesitation had just bought Elias Blackwood the time he needed to spring his trap. Caleb, no, Ethan. He reminded himself for the 100th time, stared at the blank document on his laptop screen. The cursor blinked mockingly, daring him to start his history report on Frank Lloyd Wright. But his mind wasn't on famous architects or groundbreaking designs. It was back home, with his old friends, his old life, with his mother. He glanced at the door to make sure his dad wasn't around, then opened an incognito browser window. His fingers hesitated over the keys for a moment before he typed in a familiar name, Jake Thompson. Jake had been his best friend since kindergarten. They'd done everything together, Little League, science fairs, marathon gaming sessions that stretched late into the night. And now, because of his parents' mess, Ethan had ghosted him without a word of explanation. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. Before he could talk himself out of it, Ethan navigated to an encrypted messaging app he'd discovered online. He created a new account under a fake name and sent a message to Jake's gaming handle. "Hey man, it's me. I know it's been a while, but I just wanted to let you know I'm okay. I can't say much, but I miss you guys. Hope you're doing all right." His finger hovered over the send button. He knew it was risky. His dad had drummed into him the importance of maintaining their cover, of not leaving any digital breadcrumbs that could lead back to them. But he was so tired of lying, of pretending to be someone he wasn't. He just wanted one small connection to his old life. Was that really so much to ask? Taking a deep breath, Ethan hit send. The message disappeared into the ether, and he quickly closed the browser window, heart pounding. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, in a nondescript office hundreds of miles away, a small alert popped up on Jack Hawthorne's computer. The PI had cast a wide net in his search for the Blackwoods, including monitoring known associates for any unusual activity. An encrypted message sent to Jake Thompson's gaming account from an unknown source? That definitely qualified as unusual. As Hawthorne began the process of tracing the message, Ethan sat back in his chair, a mix of relief and anxiety churning in his gut. He'd done it. He'd reached out. Now all he could do was wait and hope that somehow, someway, things would work out. Elias's fingers flew over the keyboard, lines of code scrolling across the screen faster than the eye could follow. He detected the breach in their security almost instantly, a single outgoing message from Ethan's computer to an encrypted messaging service. His first instinct had been anger. He'd trusted Ethan to understand the gravity of their situation, to follow the rules he'd laid out so carefully. But as he worked to erase the digital footprint left by his son's moment of weakness, that anger gave way to something else. Understanding, compassion. Ethan was just a kid, after all. A kid who'd been ripped away from everything and everyone he knew, forced to live a lie for months on end. Of course he'd reach out eventually. Elias should have seen it coming. As he finished covering their tracks, Elias leaned back in his chair, mind racing. This close call was a wake-up call. He'd been so focused on his plans for revenge, on protecting them from external threats, that he neglected the very real danger of Ethan's isolation and unhappiness. He needed to accelerate his plans. The longer they lived this half-life, straddling the line between their old identities and their new ones, the greater the risk became, not just of discovery, but of losing Ethan altogether. Decision made, Elias pulled up the file containing all the evidence he'd gathered against Vanessa and Marcus. It was time to spring the trap, time to end this, once and for all. As he began to put the final pieces of his plan into motion, Elias allowed himself a small, grim smile. Vanessa and Marcus thought they'd won when they betrayed him. They had no idea of the storm that was about to break over their heads. Let them come, he thought. Let them try to find us. We'll be ready. And this time, I'll be the one holding all the cards. The game was entering its final stages, and Elias Blackwood intended to win. Vanessa Blackwood's heels clicked against the polished concrete floor of the Portland office building, each step echoing with grim determination. Beside her, Marcus fidgeted nervously, his eyes darting from side to side as if expecting an ambush at any moment. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, for what felt like the 100th time since they landed in Maine. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice, Marcus. If Hawthorne's right, if Elias is really here, We have to confront him before he can do any more damage. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open to reveal a modestly appointed hallway. At the end, a frosted glass door bore the name Reed Architectural Solutions in sleek, modern lettering. Vanessa's heart pounded as they approached. Nathan Reed, the name Hawthorne had given them. The alias Elias had apparently been hiding behind all these months. It was almost laughable, really. Did he think a new name would be enough to erase their history? Without hesitation, she pushed open the door. The reception area was empty, but voices drifted from an open office beyond. One of them, achingly familiar, stopped her in her tracks. And if we adjust the solar panels here, we can increase efficiency by at least 15%. Elias, after all this time, all the sleepless nights and frantic searching, he was right there, just a few steps away. Vanessa strode forward, Marcus trailing behind like a reluctant shadow. As they entered the main office space, the conversation abruptly ceased. Elias, no, Nathan now, stood at a drafting table, blueprints spread before him. Beside him, a lanky teenager who could only be Caleb stared at them with wide, shocked eyes. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Elias straightened, his expression hardening into a mask of cold fury. Well, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm, isn't this a pleasant surprise? To what do I owe the honor? Vanessa struggled to find her voice. All the speeches she rehearsed on the plane, all the explanations and accusations, seemed to evaporate in the face of Elias's icy stare. It was Marcus who broke the silence, stepping forward with a nervous chuckle. Come on, Elias. Enough of this cloak and dagger nonsense. We're here to talk, that's all, to work things out like adults. Elias's laugh was sharp and bitter. Work things out? Is that what you call it? Tell me, Marcus, which part exactly are we working out? The part where you fucked my wife? Or the part where you plan to steal my company out from under me? Marcus blanched, taking an involuntary step back. Vanessa forced herself to meet Elias's gaze. We made mistakes, she said quietly. Terrible mistakes. But disappearing like this, taking Caleb, Elias, you have to see how wrong that is. Do I? Elias's voice was dangerously soft. Do I really, Vanessa? Because from where I'm standing, protecting my son from two manipulative, self-serving liars seems pretty damn right. Caleb, or whatever name he was going by now, shifted uncomfortably. Dad, he began, but Elias silenced him with a look. It's okay, son, he said, his tone gentling slightly. Why don't you go wait in the back room? The adults need to have a chat. For a moment, it looked like Caleb might argue, but something in Elias's expression must have convinced him, because he nodded and slipped out of the room without another word. As soon as the door closed behind him, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elias's eyes, cold as winter frost, swept over Vanessa and Marcus. So, he said, you found me. Congratulations. I'm sure whatever bottom-feeding PI you hired is very proud of himself. The question is, what exactly do you hope to accomplish here? Vanessa took a deep breath, steeling herself. We want to make things right, Elias. The company is falling apart without you. The lawsuits, the financial troubles. We can fix it together. Come home. Let's put this whole ugly mess behind us. For a moment, something flickered in Elias's eyes. Regret? Longing? But it was gone so quickly Vanessa couldn't be sure she'd seen it at all. Put it behind us, Elias repeated, his voice flat. Just like that. Wave a magic wand and pretend none of it ever happened. Is that really what you think is going to happen here? Marcus, apparently emboldened by the lack of immediate violence, stepped forward. Look, we all made mistakes, but dragging this out, hiding away like some kind of fugitive, it's not good for anyone, especially not Caleb. Think about his future, Elias. His friends, his school. You can't keep him isolated forever. It was a wrong thing to say. Elias's expression darkened, a storm gathering behind his eyes. His future, he snarled. Don't you dare pretend to care about my son's future. Not after what you've done. What we've done. Marcus's own temper flared. You're the one who kidnapped him, who's forcing him to live some ridiculous false life. You think his new friends would stick around if they knew the truth? Maybe I should go tell them right now. I'm sure they'd be very interested to learn that their buddy, Ethan, or whatever you're calling him, is really... He never got to finish the sentence. In 2 quick strides, Elias closed the distance between them, his fist connecting with Marcus's jaw with a sickening crack. Marcus stumbled backwards, blood trickling from a split lip. Dad! Caleb's voice cut through the chaos. He stood in the doorway, eyes wide with shock and fear. Elias froze, his raised fist slowly lowering. For a moment, the mask of cold fury slipped, revealing a glimpse of the pain and anguish beneath. It's okay, Caleb, he said softly. Everything's going to be okay. I promise. Vanessa, who had been watching the confrontation with growing horror, saw her chance. Caleb, honey, she said, taking a tentative step towards her son. I've missed you so much. Please, can we just talk? Your father and I, we can work this out. We can be a family again. Caleb's eyes darted between his parents, confusion and conflict written across his face. For a heart-stopping moment, Vanessa thought he might actually come to her. But then his expression hardened, and he moved to stand beside Elias. No, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. No, we can't. Elias placed a protective hand on Caleb's shoulder, his eyes never leaving Vanessa and Marcus. I think, he said, his voice deceptively calm, it's time for you to leave. Marcus, still nursing his bloodied lip, opened his mouth to argue, but Vanessa grabbed his arm, shaking her head slightly. This confrontation had gone sideways in every possible way. They needed to regroup, to figure out their next move. This isn't over, Elias, she said as they backed towards the door. You can't run forever. Elias's smile was cold and sharp as a knife's edge. Oh, I'm not running anymore, Vanessa. In fact, I'm just getting started. As the door closed behind them, Vanessa felt a chill run down her spine. She'd come here expecting to find Elias broken, desperate. Instead, she'd found a man filled with icy resolve, a man with a plan. And suddenly, she was very afraid of what that plan might be. Elias waited until he was sure Vanessa and Marcus were gone before he allowed himself to slump against the drafting table, the adrenaline draining from his system and leaving him feeling hollow and drained. Dad! Caleb's voice was small, uncertain. Are you okay? Elias straightened, forcing a reassuring smile onto his face. I'm fine, son. Just, it's been a long day. Caleb nodded, but his eyes were troubled. What happens now? Now, Elias said, his voice hardening with resolve. We finish this, once and for all. He crossed to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard as he pulled up file after file, evidence he'd spent months compiling. Each damning piece of information a nail in Vanessa and Marcus's coffin. I need you to listen carefully, Caleb, he said, not looking up from the screen. What I'm about to do, it's going to change everything, and I need to know that you understand why it has to be done. Slowly, methodically, Elias laid out the extent of Vanessa and Marcus's crimes. The fraudulent billing practices, the kickbacks from contractors, the design stolen from junior architects, passed off as their own work. With each revelation, Caleb's expression grew more horrified. How? How could they do all this? He whispered. Greed, Elias said simply. Arrogance, the belief that they could get away with anything. He turned to face his son fully, his expression grave. I know I've asked a lot of you these past months. The new identity, the secrecy, it wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry for that. But I needed time to gather all of this, to make sure they couldn't wiggle their way out of it. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd just learned. Finally, he looked up at his father, a new resolve in his eyes. "What do we do now?" Elias smiled, a grim, satisfied expression. "Now, we spring the trap." With a few keystrokes, he sent off a series of pre-prepared emails to the FBI, to the American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee, to key members of the press. "By this time tomorrow," he said, "everyone will know exactly what kind of people Vanessa Blackwood and Marcus Reeves really are." As if on cue, his phone began to ring. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. Elias answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Hello, Vanessa. I assume by now you've received my little care package." Vanessa's voice was shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "What have you done, Elias? Do you have any idea?" "Oh, I have a very good idea." Elias cut her off. "I have a good idea of exactly what you and Marcus have been up to all these years. The fraud, the theft, all of it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "What I want," Elias said, "is for you and Marcus to come back to my office. Immediately. We have some paperwork to go over." "Paperwork?" Marcus's voice now, sounding panicked. "What are you talking about?" "Confessions," Elias said simply. "Detailed confessions of every illegal thing you've done, along with some, let's call them non-disclosure agreements. You'll sign them all, or I'll make sure every scrap of evidence I have ends up in the hands of the authorities." "You can't do this," Vanessa hissed. "You'll destroy everything we've built." Elias's laugh was bitter. "No, Vanessa, you destroyed it. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice defeated. "We'll be there in 10 minutes. As the call disconnected, Elias turned to Caleb. His son's face was pale, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Caleb asked. Elias nodded, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm sure. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it." As they waited for Vanessa and Marcus to arrive, Elias felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Soon, it would all be over. Justice would be served, and maybe, just maybe, he and Caleb could start to rebuild their lives. The next hour passed in a blur of tense silence and scratching pens. Vanessa and Marcus, their faces ashen, signed page after page of meticulously prepared documents. Confessions detailing every fraudulent transaction, every stolen design, every ethical breach. Elias watched them with cold satisfaction, Caleb a silent presence at his side. This was it, the moment he'd been working towards for months. His revenge, served on crisp legal paper and bound with unbreakable contracts. As Vanessa signed the final page, her hand trembling slightly, she looked up at Elias with eyes full of despair. "Is this really what you want?" she asked softly. "To see us ruined? Imprisoned?" For a moment, Elias faltered. The weight of their shared history, the good times, the love they'd once shared, pressed down on him. But then he remembered the betrayal, the pain, and his resolve hardened once more. "What I want," he said, his voice low and controlled, "is for you to face the consequences of your actions, something you both seem to have avoided for far too long." Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the process, suddenly slammed his fist on the table. "You sanctimonious bastard," he snarled. "You think you're so much better than us? You've manipulated and schemed just as much as we ever did. You're no different. That's enough." Caleb's voice, firm and clear, cut through Marcus's tirade. He stepped forward, fixing both Vanessa and Marcus with a hard stare. "You don't get to play the victims here. Not after what you've done." Vanessa flinched as if she'd been slapped. "Caleb, honey, please." "No." Caleb shook his head. "I've heard enough. You betrayed Dad. You betrayed me. You betrayed everything our family was supposed to stand for. And for what? Money? Power? Was it worth it?" The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa and Marcus, for once, had no words. Elias placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder, a surge of pride mixing with the bittersweet realization that his son had grown up far too quickly in these past months. "It's done," he said quietly. "You should go now. Your lawyers will be in touch regarding the next steps." As Vanessa and Marcus gathered their things, moving like shell-shocked survivors of some great catastrophe, Elias felt the last of his anger drain away. In its place was a bone-deep weariness and an unexpected pang of, what? Regret? Mourning for what might have been. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving Elias and Caleb alone in the suddenly too quiet office. "So," Caleb said after a long moment, "what happens now?" Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. Now we start over. For real this time." He walked to the window, looking out at the Portland skyline. It was a beautiful view, one he'd come to appreciate over these past months. But it wasn't home. Not really. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time for Elias and Caleb Blackwood to make their return." Caleb's eyes widened. "You mean we can go back? Use our real names." Elias nodded. "The truth is going to come out soon enough. There's no point in hiding anymore. And you deserve the chance to reclaim your life, son. Your friends, your school, all of it." To his surprise, Caleb didn't immediately light up at the prospect. Instead, his brow furrowed in thought. "What about you, Dad? Your career, your reputation. Won't this hurt you too?" The question caught Elias off guard. He'd been so focused on his plan, on bringing Vanessa and Marcus to justice, that he hadn't fully considered the implications for his own future. I'm not sure," he admitted. "There will probably be some fallout. Questions about why I disappeared, about my role in all of this. But the truth is on our side. We'll weather it." Caleb nodded slowly, then stepped forward and did something that shocked Elias to his core. He hugged him, tight and fierce. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Caleb mumbled into his shirt, "for standing up to them, for doing the right thing." Elias felt a lump form in his throat. He hugged his son back, marveling at how tall he'd grown, how strong he'd become. "I'm proud of you too, kiddo. More than you know." As they broke apart, Elias felt a shift in the air, as if a great weight had been lifted. The revenge that had consumed him for so long suddenly felt hollow in the face of his son's unwavering support. "Come on," he said, grabbing his jacket. "Let's get out of here for a bit. I think we both could use some fresh air." They walked in companionable silence through the streets of Portland, the crisp autumn air filling their lungs. As they reached a small park overlooking the harbor, Elias guided them to a bench. "Caleb," he began, then corrected himself. "No, I suppose it's time we went back to our real names. Caleb, I owe you an apology." The boy looked up, surprise evident in his eyes. "For what?" Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. "For dragging you into this mess, for uprooting your life, for making you live a lie. I was so focused on getting justice. No, on getting revenge, that I didn't stop to think about what it was doing to you." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the boats bobbing in the harbor. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "I won't lie, Dad. It's been hard, really hard. I miss my friends, my school. Hell, I even miss our old house sometimes." He turned to look at Elias, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I understand why you did it, and I'm glad we stuck together through all this." Elias felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You're a better man than I am, son. I let my anger consume me. I became so focused on bringing your mother and Marcus down that I lost sight of what really matters." "And what's that?" Caleb asked. "You," Elias said simply. "Our family. What's left of it, anyway. Moving forward. Building something positive instead of tearing things down." Caleb nodded slowly. "So what happens now? Do we just go back to our old lives?" Elias shook his head. "No, I don't think we can ever truly go back. Too much has changed, but we can move forward, start fresh, but this time as ourselves. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun begin to set over the water. Finally, Caleb spoke again. Dad, I know Mom and Marcus did terrible things, but is there any chance for, I don't know, forgiveness? Not forgetting, but moving past it somehow? Elias felt a flash of his old anger, but he pushed it down. I don't know, son. That's going to take time. A lot of time. But I promise you I'll try. For your sake, if nothing else. Caleb nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer for now. As they walked back to their apartment, Elias's mind was already racing with plans. Not for revenge this time, but for redemption. For both of them. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Elias and Caleb reclaimed their true identities, facing the inevitable media storm with united front. There were questions, of course, accusations, but armed with the truth and a mountain of evidence, they weathered it all. Vanessa and Marcus faced the consequences of their actions. The legal proceedings were swift and merciless, their signed confessions leaving little room for leniency. As Elias watched them being led away in handcuffs, he felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of waste. But even as that chapter of their lives closed, a new one was beginning. Elias, true to his word, anonymously established a fund to compensate the junior architects whose work had been stolen. It wouldn't undo the damage done, but it was a start. And then on a crisp Saturday morning, Elias found himself standing before a group of wide-eyed teenagers at a local community center. Caleb stood beside him, nervously shuffling a stack of papers. "Good morning, everyone," Elias began. "I'm Elias Blackwood, and this is my son, Caleb. We're here today to talk to you about architecture. But more than that, we're here to talk about building. Building structures, yes, but also building lives. Building integrity." As he spoke, Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest. This, he realized, was what he'd been missing. Not the thrill of revenge, but the simple joy of creating something positive. Caleb stepped forward, his initial nervousness fading as he began to explain the basics of drafting to the group. Elias watched with pride, seeing not just a son, but a young man coming into his own. As the session wound down, one of the kids raised her hand. "Mr. Blackwood," she asked, "why are you doing this? I mean, you're a famous architect. Why bother with us?" Elias exchanged a look with Caleb before answering. "Because," he said softly, "everyone deserves a chance to build something beautiful. And sometimes, the most important thing we can build is a better version of ourselves." As they packed up their supplies, Caleb bumped his shoulder against Elias's. "Nice speech, Dad," he said with a grin. "Very after-school special." Elias laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Hey, watch it. I'm still learning this whole role model thing." They stepped out into the sunlight, the future stretching before them like a blank blueprint, ready to be filled with new designs, new dreams. It wouldn't be easy, Elias knew. The scars of the past wouldn't fade overnight. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Real, genuine hope. As they walked down the street, Caleb's voice drifted up. "Hey, Dad, I'm glad we're doing this. Together." Elias smiled, throwing an arm around his son's shoulders. "Me too, son, me too." And as they disappeared around the corner, the sun glinted off the windows of the surrounding buildings, as if the very city was winking at them, approving of this new blueprint they were creating, not of steel and glass, but of redemption and second chances. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.